The talk tonight is on the topic of the first of the four vows: vow to be with all things, vow to save all beings. The Bodhisattva vow: I vow to save all beings, I vow to be with all things. A lot of discussion on that. If you were to go on and Google that, you would get like thousands and thousands of various hits and various things you could look at. All different ideas and opinions and so on. The way I like to talk about it is based on having worked with that vow for a long time. Not only a little bit, some in this tradition, but also in the Tibetan tradition, in which the vow is taken separately from the refuge vow. The way we say it here is, I vow to be with all things. And I often say, probably might have said it to you individually or in a talk, to practice that, one of the ways you can practice it, study it, and work with it is to first be with your own thought patterns. Every thought that arises is like a living being, like something comes into existence and passes out of existence. And the idea there, the practice part of it is don't do anything with it. Don't look away from it. Don't accept it. Don't reject it. Right back to the three poisons again. Do nothing. And in this way, strengthen, just a relative way of saying it, your ability to not meddle with anything, but to fundamentally see what it is. This happens in our life. It happens walking down the street, taking a walk, meeting a homeless person, talking to a clerk in a store, being a clerk in a store, serving people, waiting on people. So sentient beings are numberless. I vow to free them. I vow to save them. And the first thing that happens with this is thinking, it's in a way, I can barely save myself. I'm not going to save all these other guys. What does it really mean to save someone? And what about that's teaching that there is no solid self, no solid other, so there isn't anyone to save. I've heard that said too. To find all of this all over the place. But one of the interesting things about awareness is anytime you do something with it, anything in awareness, that the opposite situation starts to happen. If you push on something, something starts pulling. If you pull on something, something starts pushing. If you shut down on something, something starts knocking on the door. So the energy is can get very polarized, and we can be dealing with things if we receive this vow, if we're observing this vow, it can be as soon as you do that, if in fact you do, or if you're doing it formally, or maybe you're doing it informally. Maybe you're just thinking about that, and what does that mean to be a Mahayanist, to practice the Zen path or the Mahayana path of putting others before yourself. That's a big challenge to do that. And what I like to say about it is first work with yourself. First work with your own situation, so that as you go out to work with others, you're more clear, because you've worked with your own neurosis, your own craziness, your own hope and fear. And doing this on the cushion is very clarifying over time. I'm not saying that clarification isn't painful. Sometimes the very act of opening up and seeing what is there can be very abrasive and even irritating, and maybe we want to get away from it. Sometimes people will even say, well, this doesn't work for me. I'm going to try S training, or I'm done with this meditation. I'm going to go back and do Tai Chi or yoga or something. And this is not correct. you may personally have to move in a different direction for a while. You may have to do this or do that or make some kind of adjustment so that you can see better the way you keep doing what. Rejecting yourself in favor of some idea about yourself. The idea about yourself, the idea about who you are is just that. It's an idea. So just very simply, sitting down, sitting still, holding still, and endeavoring to do, just observe what comes and what goes, what comes and what goes. Will show you very clearly the way in which you object, or you agree, or you forget, or you add on thoughts of this doesn't make any difference, this doesn't mean anything. Everyone is doing that differently. Everyone I talk to is in a different, it's just like people are from different planets. We're all human. I think there's maybe one or two aliens here. That's meant to be funny. Aliens are not laughing. So, but everyone is wired so differently that the only thing I can really do as a teacher is to endeavor to meet you where you're at, to see where you're at, and then see if I have permission to help you or not. And when I say permission, I don't mean someone saying, yeah, go ahead, yeah, lay it on me, dude. Help me, show me where my neurosis is. Come on. Almost like a challenge, you know. So that then the person can say to you, or even think, they might leave and say, I didn't quite see. Nice try, Sokuzan. One of the things that begins to happen as we do this, as you do a lot of practice, I mean a lot of it, you begin to see that you know less and less what to do next, what's going to happen next, what your life is even about. Sometimes it can be extremely distressing. And without having, that's why we have the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, without having a structure like that can give you some kind of support. So a conceptual, however you want to call it, some kind of support so you can continue to go deeper into this, because without that support, probably won't go very deep. I'm not saying that there aren't people who aren't capable of doing this, maybe without any 3 jewels. It's possible. So this vow is about giving you some kind of a structure, some kind of a form, something to help you see a couple things. To help you because when you do it, to help you see that there isn't really a solid being. That there's a constant flux. You like to call this discontinuous. That the identity is there, but it keeps changing. It's discontinuous. It's not a solid being that can be counted on. You can't count on. Have you noticed that about yourself? You can't count on who you are. This is why we're always looking for reference points. I'll do much better if I practice Theravada Buddhism. I'll do much better if I sit more, sit less, do this, push on this, push on that. I need a mantra. No, I don't need a mantra. I need a break. I just need a break. You go do something else for a while. This happens to everyone. I'm not saying that this is only going to happen to a few people. Probably going to happen to everybody in some way, some different kind of style or way. And if you're genuinely dedicated to fulfilling, observing this vow, your personal time starts to evaporate. The vow starts to take over. So if you're not paranoid now, you should be. It just starts to take over. You just start to to find that your focus goes more towards others all the time. It might take a few years, it might take a few decades. You have some questions?
What does it look like when your focus starts to go towards others?
They might notice it more than you do. It's just a natural thing for you to do. Perhaps, but then it depends on our own causes, conditions, who we are. You just notice that even though there's things you would really like to do, other people tend to take priority over that. What's happening with others just becomes more and more important. Not because you're making a lot of money, not because you're becoming famous. It just becomes more and more important. Go ahead.
How do you meet somebody where they're at if they're vacillating? Maybe they're coming and then they're going. Do you follow them or do you?
Yeah, exactly. You do. And that is not, because the desire, the feeling is to want to be stationary while they vacillate. That's not meeting people where they're at. You have to vacillate with them. And I'm not saying you mimic their vacillation, but you have to be with them. You have to meet people where they're at. If they're going this way, you have to meet them. If they're going that way, you have to meet them. You may or you may not be ready to do that. You may be so tied up in yourself and your own mind and your own situation that you may not be able to do this at all. I know people who have received this vow who are completely myopic about just me and how I am, who I am, what I'm doing, how I'm feeling, and actually refuse. Not out and out, refuse, but they're very style refuse. They're circular, and you cannot get on that. You can stand off on one side and say, how do you meet them where they're at? You just watch them spin. Yes.
When somebody steps away, how do you meet them where they're at?
When they step away from you as a teacher, or you as a bodhisattva, or you as a, how do you mean? Somebody stops.
I think of the first person that lived here with me.
Yeah.
That they stepped away.
That's a good example.
And what is meeting that person? Someone that.
What did I do?
It seems like you just waited for them to do what they needed.
Still waiting. I don't have permission with that person. Just don't. The person kind of gave me permission. They came. A very sweet person came and told me, said, yes, yeah, I want to do this, and very sincere. And they believed everything they said. You know that. Remember that. And then they went elsewhere with the help of chemicals. But that's not. You can't just say, well, chemicals, because everybody's got some kind of chemical going on. We're nothing but chemicals. Go ahead.
So meeting someone where that's not necessarily supporting them and going wherever they want.
Not necessarily. That's why it's difficult to get some kind of protocol for it, because everyone is so different and wired so differently that one person you might be really following them and really watching, another person you might really object and you might argue with them about it, another person you might just not do anything. You might just say, oh, okay, well, whatever. You might not say anything. You might be so indifferent or apparently indifferent that they might say, so doesn't this bother you that I'm going? And then you may say, well, yeah, I want you to go, but I can also see that there's no gap to put anything in. You're not ready to receive any information about this at all. You're just telling me what you're going to do. And the next person, the next situation may come along, and that may just be maybe a totally different situation. You may actually pursue them and try to get some kind of show them some kind of reason why they should not do this or that, or leave or go somewhere else, if that's what you're asking. That particular situation was difficult. It was difficult for me in one way and for you in another way. More about that or anything?
Yeah. So when meeting somebody where they're at, it's not based on a protocol. What underlies or what is at the heart of meeting somebody where they're at?
So meeting them where they're at, it is the protocol. It is the protocol, but it's just not very much. On the other hand, it's everything. It's meeting them where first you have to see where you're at, because if you don't, then you won't trust what you'll second guess yourself and not be sure of what you're doing. Whereas if you've met yourself if you know who you are, then you can't help but meet everybody where they're at. They might have other ideas about what you're up to or what you're doing. They may think that you're being unfair, or you don't care enough, or that you're disinterested, or that you're being too, or that you're manipulating them, or that you're judging them, or any number, the whole list could be any one of those. And you could be doing that functionally. It could look like that to lots of different people, and yet you'd be meeting everyone exactly where they're at, because it's like what? What is it like?
Mirror.
Huh?
A mirror.
Yeah. Thank you. Good one. Yeah. Yeah.
One more question.
Go ahead.
How do you meet somebody where they're at if you're unclear about where you're at?
To be unclear about where you're at isn't so much about being clear about where you're at, it's being clear about who you are. If you're clear about who you are, then there isn't any place you aren't at. Because you're just whoever you are, you know who you are.
So how do you meet somebody where they're at if you're unclear of who you are?
It'll be a challenge.
Is there a way to work with that or interfere less with other people's lives?
On the cushion, sit down, look at the wall, and see how you keep avoiding yourself. We've all done it. Anybody in here who's a meditator, which I can see everybody in here is. I don't have any completely new people. As soon as you come in and sit down on the cushion, as soon as you open your eyes and look at the wall, you're seeing it. Every time, every single time, you're seeing it. But what do? We add to that. You'll notice as soon as you sit down, there's nothing happening. But yet, what happens? Thoughts start arising. And if they don't arise, then thoughts about why aren't thoughts arising? Why isn't anything going on? Am I in samadhi? Probably not. Yes, Michael.
You just answered it.
Good.
That was good.
Jim.
Yeah, how does the notion of when in doubt, do nothing play into this meeting people where they are?
No, if you have doubts about it, don't just wait. It plays into it in that if you're clear about it, maybe you need to push or pull or act on that in some way. But if you have doubts about what's happening, then everything has not come together. There's still a lot of clouds around. But then the clarity may not show up as a kind of conventional clarity where you know what needs to occur. It might be more about you see that it's time to act. And you may.
Is this largely intuitive?
Well, sure, yeah. That would be a way of talking about it. Our intellect and our constructs in terms of concepts. To someone who is very clear, they'll be very aware of whether they're using concepts or whether the intuition is functioning, and probably to what degree each one is operating. To someone who's not clear, they can be thinking like crazy and think they're using their intuition. That will even be a commentary like, well, it just have to be me.
So when we're not clear, then we're likely to be meddling, or more likely to be meddling.
Unless you got your hands in your pocket and your baseball cap pulled down, then you're probably right.
Lots of them have.
So if you could just use your body the language, your own body position to help you mind your own business. I sometimes say, don't hook up your vocal cords. I get to do that, but you guys don't. And I'm saying, not to be silly, but I'm saying, but actually wait a little bit before you jump on something and say, that shouldn't, shouldn't do that, you should do this. Sometimes just waiting a little bit will allow things to change enough so that we see where we could move in that direction, or we might see where it's time to really, without a thought that it's time, we might just find ourselves turning the other way. We see ourselves walking towards our car. And there's no commentary like, well, I'm just done with that. Well, I've had enough of this stuff. It wouldn't necessarily be anything like that. It would just be very much like looking at a cloud. Not much to think. You can look at a cloud and think how beautiful, or you can look at a cloud and not think anything. Look at the moon. Look at the moon and tell me what you're thinking. There's not much to think about when you look at the moon. It's very round. Well, of course, it's the moon. It's not very round tonight. Well, of course, it's the moon. Sheldon, make it a really, really clear question.
If I need to, I feel like I need to be more clear about who I am before I can help someone else. How does meeting people where they're at fit in with that?
It fits in because don't do anything. However somebody's acting, whatever they're doing, just don't move into that territory unless you have to. And that way you're meeting them where they're at, because you don't really know where they're at. Am I correct? Yeah, you don't know where they're at. You can see that you're laying ideas, opinions, beliefs, judgments, and so on them, and you can see that that's what you're seeing. You're not seeing where they're at, so don't do anything. And then you may, because of your own practice, it may start to show up what is actually happening with that person. And then you may find yourself moving. If you think about it ahead of time, it's probably you're probably not meeting them. You're meeting your projections of them where they're at. We've all had someone talk to us and actually being talked to you had someone talk to you where they're talking to, you can see that they're not really talking to you. They don't know you. They're talking to their idea of you. It's almost like you could, sometimes it's so strong you feel like you could jump sideways and they'd keep looking at where you were, because they have such a strong idea of who you are. They'll even tell you, well, you're the kind of person that's this, and well, I know you're this. People have such strong projections about everybody. We run into that all the time. People don't like open space. They don't like to look at someone and just not know. Just not know. I'll say it again, just not know. That doesn't feel right. So we make up shit, put it on with projections on things. We go by what somebody's wearing, how tall they are, how old they are, what kind of car they're driving, how they stand, how they smile, anything we can do to get a little bit of information so we can do what? Increase the separation so we're not threatened. Very threatening to have open space. This is why we have so many word fillers in our languages. In our language, the one that I succumb to all the time is probably say that a lot. But then there's other ones, like that one. And then there's other ones like, you know what I'm saying?
So the second half of the vow is I will free them. I think is how I vow to free them.
Mm-hmm.
How do we free?
You start by freeing them from your preconceptions. Because they're locked, you have everybody locked up in your idea of who they are. So that's one place you can start. And then there's the fundamental realization that you actually aren't separate from anybody anyway. So if you become clear, then everyone, was clear. The Buddha, when he awoke, according to the story, when he awoke and was the awakened one, everywhere he looked, he saw the Buddha. Every person he met he could see that he was not separate from them. It's a really good question there if anybody wants to ask it. Yes, sir.
These perceptions that we have of other people, is it those perceptions that are the problem, or is it the perceptions of ourself that is the problem?
Both, but it's basically just we don't actually see who's there. We don't see what is there. We see our projection, our perception of it. Kevin.
If Buddha awoke to see Buddha everywhere, and that was an awakening, why did he see delusion? Why did he look at other human beings and see delusion?
Because delusion and awakening are not separate. Two separate concepts that seem to be polarized, not separate. Just like night and day are not separate. You have to see it. If you can think about it and have a really profound, incredibly sharp conceptual understanding of that and be able to give lectures on it to people.
So why is it easier to see someone's delusion than their awakening?
I didn't say that.
No,
Oh, you said it.
I said, yeah,
That
wasn't a quote.
It wasn't a quote. What was the question?
Why is it easier to see someone's delusion than it is their awakening?
It's not necessarily true. Everywhere I look, I see awakening and I see delusion. I see you're deluded about your awakening instead of being awakened about your delusion. If you're awakened about your delusion, you're a Buddha. If you're deluded about your awakening, then you're a sentient being.
But they go hand in hand, awakening about my delusion and delusion about my awakening.
That's too complicated.
That's just what you said.
I'm not accusing you of anything.
If the delusion and awakening cannot be separated, then one could posit just
They can be separated. They're just not fundamentally separate. Just like you can separate your fingers, but they're not fundamentally separate. Fundamentally, it's a hand, but you can separate them. I can look at this finger. I can look at that finger. I can trade back and forth so they don't get jealous.
So
Yes.
why are people walking around with their apparent delusions and not their apparent enlightenment?
Passion, aggression, and ignorance, hope and fear. The downside of being a sovereign entity, a spirit that is not a self.
Is it not possible to rid oneself of passion, aggression, and ignorance?
Oh, no, you didn't do that.
So is it as simple as seeing that I have passion, aggression, and ignorance?
But I think that's part of it.
What's the other part?
That you see that you're not separate from it, so that you can't fight with it. The tendency is we have anger and we think that we're angry. We need to get rid of the anger or justify it or blame the reason why we're angry. You're not actually separate from anything. You're not separate from anger. You're not separate from passion. You're not separate from ignorance. It's called transcendence. You actually transcend the apparent separation that is the dichotomy between delusion and awakening. You actually transcend that.
When aggression arises, its underlying energy is aggression. How is that any different holding on to aggression. Aggression is aggression. Aggression begets aggression.
So I'm not following your question.
How does one separate oneself from the arising of aggression?
Stop trying to separate yourself from it. That's warfare. Nothing is, separation is always some kind of tension or some kind of adding on. Do you have a question here online?
Kozan.
Take hers. We'll come back to yours.
Kozan in Traverse City asks, if everyone is the Buddha, then what beings are there to free?
There aren't any. I mean, it's the absolute situation is there aren't any. On the other hand, people are suffering. They don't know that they're awakened. They don't know that the fundamental nature is completely without flaw. That everything is the great perfection. They don't know it, and so therefore they suffer. We have difficulty, and we have a preconception about what it would be like to be awake, and what it would be like not to suffer, and what it would be like to. We try to live up to that and match that, or accomplish that, or be that, or get rid of the difficulty and get into the good stuff. More?
What is the nature of aggression? What is the fundamental nature of aggression?
Impatience. Wanting things to be different than they are and demanding it. You like that? This should happen now. Yes, sir.
What is the Buddha?
What is the Buddha? I'm looking at the Buddha. Want another answer?
What am I?
You're looking at the Buddha. No. Okay. Lisa.
If we're not separate from ignorance, how do we see through the ignorance?
I think just being persistent. It's like when we just do it and we feel more and more like we're just not going to understand this. We're just not going to, this is just not working for us. I'm not saying this will happen for everyone, but there's a feeling of trying to, it's like trying to, I'm trying to think of some, like there's the myth of Sisyphus, who was the guy who pushed the rock up the hill and he'd get it right to the top, and then it would roll back down again and we'd have to go to the bottom. So it's that kind of feeling like just being worn out from trying to do something like that, when really you could have just left the rock at the bottom. But of course people would call him lazy then. You could have carved something out of it, like a stone polar bear. But then he would have had to paint it, unless it was already a black and white stone. In which case, then he would just have to look at the black and white and see what part would be black and make sure. And then he might find that polar bear would be in a really odd position. So it'd be, it could be just really terrible for him, no matter what he did.
It wasn't a polar bear, it was a panda.
Oh, thanks for the correction. Kevin.
What is the fundamental difference between the aggression that arises in one that is awakened and one that is not?
The one who is awakened and the one who is not. So if aggression rises in one who is awakened, there's no hatred. There's just heat. But there's no hatred. There's no one that is being attacked. No solid being there. No solid being. No one being aggressive. No one being at the other end of the aggression. Aggression Anger without hatred is one way of saying it.
If
Love without lust, without grasping. Go ahead.
if there's no focus to the aggression that is arising, then what is its cause?
What is its cause?
What is its cause? What is
Just conditions, causes and conditions that are all over the place, rampant. I mean, you could find one and say, well, it's because of this and this and this, but you would be missing lots of different things. Better to hold still and look at the larger picture, the bigger picture, the whole matrix of the whole thing, rather than try to find some kind of blame or cause or first cause.
Does passion, aggression, or ignorance arise without a story in one that is awakened?
It can. Either way, doesn't matter because the story is untrue.
From what you're saying, it sounds like aggression has this kind of a pure energy quality to it that it's just in and of itself aggression.
You could talk about it that way, but it couldn't be you couldn't take your own aggression as it's arising and say, well, I'm just going to make this as pure energy. It's probably too late.
All right, that's the problem.
Huh?
I say that's the problem.
Yes. If you want to say it that way. The problem is the awareness itself that doesn't see very clearly what is occurring. Michael.
Is it aggression arising or just an emotion that can be turned into aggression?
It could be. Go in there. Sheldon.
If a practitioner here is not taking vows formally, how does meeting people where they're at work with that situation?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part of it.
How does meeting people where they're at work with that situation?
Of someone who is not receiving jukai
Or
or
not taking vows, not taking formally taking vows.
receiving vows. This would be the same situation from the perspective of the situation itself. It would still be, you're still dealing with, you're still functioning out of this teaching, trying to understand this teaching. And you're still endeavoring to meet people where they're at, trying to see where you're at. So I just feel that the vow, and this is not a sales pitch. Don't misunderstand it. I just feel that if receiving the vow gives you more glue, it reminds you more and more of what you're really trying to do. So, but some people are not ready to do that, and I'm not ready to sell anybody on it or convince them. I will actually dissuade you from it if you ask me for a while until you make sure that, of course, I've had people badger me about that, and one fellow here a few years ago was just asking, and then I finally said, well, it didn't, something seemed fishy about it, but then I said, okay, again, and then he never took a stitch. He was just trying to get me to do what he, just trying to push on me somehow. But then again, even saying that, I don't know what was really going on with the guy. I did the best I could to help him, but that apparently wasn't something that was in the cards for him. So very different for everyone. Yes.
How do you meet yourself where you're at?
Me?
How do I meet myself where I'm at?
Sit a lot, hold still, look at what moves, which is, of course, the mind. That's what we need to get into view, and see over time that who you think you are is not solid. It takes a while. Just see that you're not a solid identity happening. There's various identities come and go and come and go. One doesn't work, we try another one, and then sometimes the way we look at it is we think that we're a solid being who's having a negative feeling, or we're a solid being who's having the depression, or we're a solid person who's having depression and could get rid of it. And actually, when you're having depression, you are depression. There's not a being having depression. There's just depression. There's not a being who's happy. There's just happiness. There's not for someone who's having compassion. There's just compassion. But that has to be realized. And, I'm not saying there's another way, but the way that it looks to me it needs to be done is you need to sit down and insist on seeing who you are. Insist on seeing the truth yourself. This is a self-realization. It's a do-it-yourself enlightenment project. You have to do it yourself. Even the Buddha said to his disciples, his students, when he was passing away, he said, "I've taught you everything I can. Work it out. Work out your salvation with diligence. Go work it out." Because it's not something to believe in. There's not something to believe and aspire to. Nobody's going to reach down and pull you up into that. Well, does that help? Is it helpful what I said? You understand what I'm saying? I'll say it again. Sit down, set aside time to sit down, hold still, watch what continues to move, and watch if you do that enough, eventually you'll start looking at what's watching that movement. And you'll see that is discontinuous. It can't continue. It breaks up into pieces and chunks. It might even be a little frightening at first.
How is that breaking up helpful? Or is it
Breaking up isn't so helpful as you see it. So you can see that it's in pieces. So there's nothing to fasten onto. There's not one solid being somewhere that needs to be promoted or demoted or enhanced. Or have all of you noticed how you can talk to any other person for a little while and you can kind of see the way they're self-centered, but you can't quite see your own self-centeredness? And you can see other people. Glad I'm not that guy. Glad I'm not her. What a pain in the butt that person is. They're so self-centered. They're so into themselves. So how do I look? Do I seem self-centered?
Oh, yeah.
I'm working really hard at it. I have to manifest that way. You guys aren't going to listen to me. I sit up here and say, "Oh, I'm just nobody. No, I'm just a poor little monk who doesn't know anything. I'm so unenlightened." It's the first time I've seen you laugh all day, Stephen. Yes, sir.
When you're endeavoring to meet people where they're at, you think it would be necessary sometimes to create your identity based on them?
Well, you can't help that if you're meeting them where they're at. You can't help because your identity is not solid. So your identity is constantly fluctuating in terms of whoever you're talking to. To someone who doesn't understand what this is, it's going to feel crazy or like schizophrenia. Or it could be, if you're grasping in a solid self and you see your personality start to shift, then this can freak you out. But if you know there's no solid self anywhere, then this moving around of the personality is just kind of entertaining. Not really, it's actually kind of boring. But it's fluctuating, it's moving. You realize that 1 minute, 1 second, 1 hour, you have this kind of dynamic, and then that goes away and there's another dynamic. But it's not someone having the dynamic so much as it's just the dynamic is operating as an identity. Yes. Since you.
How can you work with the conditioning that moving around of a personality is a huge problem?
So if I'm following you, you're saying the conditioning that is moving around, or
a personality that moves around.
Yes.
A lot. There's a conditioning that's a problem.
Okay.
So how can that be worked with?
Bring them to me and I'll correct them.
Bring who?
Yeah, bring who? I like that. Far out. Nearby. So the kind of the, you could say, knee-jerk reaction or action of people is to try to stop, solidify, hold still who they are so they know who they are. We hear people say it in the phrase fillers. Well, I'm the kind of person that doesn't like circuses. I'm the kind of person that really, really likes. I'm the kind of. I've always been a Republican. I've always felt this way. I've always done this. Well, I was taught this. I'm just telling you a few of them. There's all kinds of them that will come piling on. The minute there's any kind of distress or discomfort, you can feel those little, what do they call them, tapes coming in, parent tapes or whatever kind of tapes, past life tapes, come in and trying to stabilize things and get everything relatively stable for a short time. The whole world is, if you watch the news, it's, my goodness, we're not doing well. Let me take a look at the big picture. Yes.
Oh, back to the last part of the vow, I vow to freedom.
Yes.
What is the freedom that we're vowing?
Yeah. So freeing them, if you are working in that area, you are freeing them from their attachment to hope and fear. You're helping someone become free of thinking they have to be somebody, of thinking they have to accomplish something, of thinking there's something to live up to. We don't even know how we got here. We don't even know what a human being is. We know what it does. It thinks, it eats, sleeps, has kids, plays golf in some cases, wastes time, spends money, does all kinds of things, wears clothes, makes clothes. The mundane part is very easy to see all the things that happen, but if you stop and think about it, we're only going to be here so long. 60, 70 years or whatever it may be. And everything just comes apart and it dissolves. And I mean, what happens to us? Who are we? What did we die? Are we reborn again? So what actually does happen? And if somebody is here and they're suffering, they're having difficulty, then we work with them where they're at. As near as we can tell, we try to meet them where they're at if they give us permission. Yes, sir.
Is there a mundane element to this that related to basics like food, clothing, shelter, healthcare?
Of course, yeah. You need to relate to all that. Or get your wife to do it, maybe. Get your sangha to do it. Get a sangha. It's like Steve Martin wrote a book, wrote something, he said, how to be a millionaire. Remember that? First get $1 million. How to be a meditation teacher. First get a bunch of students. So we're a little past 9. Any final questions? Save all beings. A good thing to contemplate. You can take that to the cushion and think about that. Yes? No? Casey, anything? Jeff?
It's too much of a jumping off point right now. Let me think about it for a while.
Okay, think about it. Think about it for a week. Bring it back. Bring it back for the all day. Come to the all day. Place is going to be really crowded. I hope. I don't hope for much. Okay. Stephen, any questions about humor? Anything like that? Jesse? Arn. Shoka? All right. Very good. Thank you so much. Save all beings.
Mirror.
Murder.
Don't forget, this Saturday is our all day, so please come and join us. And the donation boxes are still in the hallway. Please fill them up. Thank you.
May this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji-o-san, shi-shi-ku. Shi-son-mu-sa-mo-ko-sa. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, family, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.